Hi everybody, this is Farouk, the founder of the website knowmyself.com that gets 500,000 visits each month and that has got 11 million visits so far. I've wrote 8 books, sold a decent number of copies to the world, and my work was covered by several famous TV channels and newspapers. In this video, I'm going to talk about depression or dealing with depression. A few days ago, I was talking to one of my friends and she was feeling sad because someone told her that her depression was a result of her genes. One of the worst things that could happen to a depressed person ever is believing that his depression is irreversible. After all, if she believed that her depression was caused by her genes, then she would never care about helping herself and she would never believe that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. So let's discover together or discuss together the truth about the relationship between depression and genes. Depression happens because of 2 factors. I'll call them the 2 rings. The first ring is the genetic tendency to become depressed, and the second ring is the environmental factors. Let me make the word genetic tendencies clear. A genetic tendency is the tendency to become depressed, and it's not a depression gene. There is no such a thing called a depression gene, and you can never say that you are depressed because you have the depression gene. But instead, you have a genetic tendency that if came together with the environmental factors or a certain environmental factor, you will end up depressed. So what are these environmental factors? For example, stress is one of the famous environmental factors that could lead to depression. If you were subjected to stress for a long period of time, let's say for 4 or 5 months, you will end up depressed if you have the tendency to become depressed. So this means that the tendency alone cannot cause depression and the environmental factors alone cannot cause depression. And those 2 rings must combine in order for depression to happen. But let me tell you one thing. There is a 3rd ring that connects those 2 rings together. And if you manage to do anything about this 3rd ring, then you would never become depressed even if you have the genetic tendency. This 3rd ring that should fit in between those 2 is the coping skills or your coping skills. Back to the stress example. If you were stressed or if you were subjected to a prolonged stress, and if you learned how to cope with your stress, or if you managed to cope with your stress, you will prevent this stress from turning into depression, and so depression would never happen. In short, the key to preventing depression and to recovering from depression is to develop your coping abilities. For example, anger. Anger could lead to depression. For example, if you are one of the people who never stand up for their rights and who never ask for their rights and who keep the things that pisses them off inside themselves, then most probably you will end up depressed because this is not a proper way to channel your anger. But if you developed your coping skills and learned how to deal with this anger and learned how to prevent this anger from being stored inside you, then even if you have the genetic tendencies, you won't end up depressed. The same goes for all other emotions. For example, helplessness. Helplessness is one of the most famous reasons that could lead to depression. If you are feeling helpless and if you didn't manage to find a solution for your problems or to stop feeling helpless by doing anything, you will end up depressed. But if you learned how to solve your problems, if you manage how to not feel helpless, if you learned how to develop new skills so that you don't feel helpless, your helplessness would never turn into depression. In short, the key that connects your genetic tendencies and your environmental factors is your coping abilities. Develop your coping abilities, learn how to solve your problems, develop new skills, learn new life skills, and you will prevent depression from happening and you will cure your current depression. I hope this message was clear. Don't blame your genes once again because your genes are innocent. And let me know if you have any question. If you want more information, just feel free to visit my website www.